Lawyers, which of your ideal defenses was broken by the ugliest client? Story 1. Lawyer realizes client's guilt while watching disturbing murder videos. Even though I've made a throwaway, I'm going to be a bit vague because I still take my ethical duties to former clients seriously and can't breach privilege or the NDA I signed. This is a story from a long time ago during the summer after my first year of law school when I was briefly working at a well-known criminal defense firm. The client whose case I was working was one of several defendants charged with conspiracy to commit murder. 3 individuals had committed the murders, and several others had either helped plan it, abducted the victims, came along to watch, or filmed it. In order to see whether our client was one of the individuals present at the scene, I had to watch multiple videos of the murders. I watched multiple people brutally killed in about the worst possible way you can imagine. They were chopped into pieces while they were alive and had their skulls stomped in. It wasn't some grainy security footage. It was HD video taken by bystanders just a few feet away. The videos showed someone's brain squirting out of their head, and another person screaming as their hands and arms were hacked off. I also had to listen to the audio to see if our client's voice could be heard. The screams were bad. The laughter was worse. It has stuck with me for years and years, and I don't see it going away anytime soon. Thankfully, my internship at that firm ended a few weeks later at the end of the summer. I never looked up the sentence from the case, and have no desire to. In our case, there was no presumption of innocence. The individuals involved had all taken pleas in hope that the prosecutors wouldn't seek the death penalty. The only thing that would change was whether our client would get the death penalty, if he was present/filming, or life in prison, if we showed that he played a more minimal role. Working in criminal defense meant setting my judgment for people aside so that they could be afforded the rights guaranteed to them by the Constitution. I still did my job to the best of my ability, but I found myself lying awake at night for several weeks in a row, praying to every god that I knew that each of those motherfuckers involved would fry in the electric chair, and that someone would laugh at their screams too. After that internship, I never returned to criminal law. I now practice civil law where I help people recover for wrongs done to them. Story 2. Lawyer hears 911 call of client slitting victim's throat. I listened to a 911 call where the victim's throat was slit while on the call by our client. I will never forget her gurgling and sounding like she was dying. Somehow she ultimately lived through this, saying, "He killed me, he killed me." Story 3. Prosecutor discovers client starved adopted children. Repeated offense after release. I'm on the other side, but I've got a defendant who went to prison for starving 3 adopted children to the point that they needed weeks of hospitalization, then got out of prison and married a guy with children so that she could start starving them too. Listening to her interview where she attempts to justify what she did to both sets of kids disturbed me more than any of the murder cases I've worked on. Story 4. Lawyer views child porn evidence, realizes client's lack of remorse. When I had to go to the U.S. Attorney's Office to view the evidence in his case, there they were, the hundreds of images of child porn he had traded, the close-up images of his baby's genitals that he had taken and sent around the internet, the pictures of his neighbor's daughters playing in their kiddie pool. Realized he just could not help himself. But he also never once claimed responsibility or showed remorse, so I don't feel too badly for him. Story 5. Lawyer shocked by client's refusal to pay victim's medical bills after throwing her out window. I had a client who was accused of domestic violence. Essentially, he threw his girlfriend out of a second-story window. Now he's got a terrible history, but so do a lot of my. Story 6. Client stalks attorney, files multiple bar complaints, and harasses family. Not me, but someone I know. This came from another attorney who left the practice, like literally moved and became a monk or something. Previous attorney dropped PC, claims they no longer accept legal insurance, explained that I can only do task A, agrees, and we proceed. Following week, client is waiting for me in the parking lot for an update at 7 a.m. then demands I file a formal complaint against numerous politicians in other states for frivolous claims for a different matter. When I refuse, client files a bar complaint and leaves a negative review. Legal insurance refuses to pay for previous work done, as client was not the one named on policy. Found out client was stealing someone else's identity. Client moves out of state, files a bar complaint in new state against me. I'm not even licensed there. Client finds my mother's Facebook page and yells at her for raising a terrible child. My mother freaks out, panics. Now my mother won't use social media. Client moves back to my state, literally moves into my apartment complex. Now I see client weekly for nearly a year. Client gets evicted, blames me, files another bar complaint. Complaint is thrown out, ends up in jail for a DUI, calls my office to assist. During the intake with junior attorney, client provides insurance information. Same information provided before, which is invalid. This went on from 2017 through 2019. Story 7. Client DIYs estate plan, loses $90 million in taxes. I have a family that my firm has long represented. I did trust and estate work for a couple different generations. One of the family members was absolutely adamant that lawyers are all overpaid idiots, and it's a huge waste of time and money to hire a lawyer when modern technology gives you access to legal forms on the internet for a tiny fraction of the cost. Big-time independent thinker energy. Knew more about medicine than any doctor, knew more about law than any lawyer, and so on. DIY'd his own estate plan, to the tune of about $90 million in gift, estate, and GST taxes plus penalties. After specific gifts and failure to apportion plus legal costs and fees, his dependents got very close to $0 out of his $100 million estate, almost all of which could be sourced to his inheritance. The nature of his assets and intended distribution scheme would have made it possible to freeze, squeeze, and burn his estate to virtually $0 in taxes, leaving north of $99 million for his intended beneficiaries. Whoops. Story 8. Client falsely claims representation, causing stress and legal confusion. The worst client I've ever had, I actually didn't have. The guy's a total scumbag, chronically in trouble, and never pays his bills. Numerous foreclosures, routine garnishments, and every single time anybody threatens him with legal action, he tells them I or someone in our firm is his attorney. I've gotten numerous last-minute calls from court administration telling me I was missing a hearing because he told them he hired me, but he didn't. I've thought of putting a banner on the website or adding it to our voicemail. Thank you for calling ABC Legal Services, where we do not represent John Smith and haven't for 10 years. If you know the extension of the party you'd like to reach. Sometimes he calls us directly, and last time it was to notarize a document on behalf of a friend of his who has a POA from a person, which was valid until the principal died last year. This guy is perfectly well aware of the rule about POAs lapsing on death, he just doesn't care. He offered us a very generous fee, but it wasn't tempting in any way because of course he'd never actually pay it. And this kind of scheme is typical of him. He has several convictions for various petty frauds and swindles in his past, and he has always stalled the matters for a long time by claiming his attorney was my partner. I wasn't with the firm then, but that for some reason the certificate of representation hadn't come through. This guy seriously caused me more stress in my career than almost anyone I've actually worked for. Story 9. Unpaid military client insults lawyer over settled divorce terms. Client hired me to do his contested divorce. He didn't have much money, so I dropped my rate by about 30% and didn't require a retainer. He was active duty military and I'm National Guard, so 1. I wanted to help him out, and 2. I knew if I got in touch with his command, they'd make sure I got paid. We go to a hearing on temporary custody and support. Judge tells counsel in chambers basically what she's going to do if we have the hearing. I don't think it's appropriate, but it's pretty typical for her. It's an effort to get people to settle. Wife's lawyer offers to settle for basically what the judge said she was going to do, minus a little on the child support. I go out and tell him we should take the deal his wife is offering because it's not going to get much better and it could get way worse. The facts were not in his favor. He takes the deal. Fast forward a couple of months, and he is super pissed. The cell phone bill is in the support he's supposed to say, when I clearly told him that before he agreed to it, and it was read into the record. We go round and round about this, and I tell him the fees it would cost for me to get it changed would be more than the phone bills. Granted, he hasn't paid me a dime at this point. I ask him to have a meeting in my office, where he continues to complain about the cell phone bill thing. I tell him I have to get paid something. It's not fair to my other clients and my partners that basically their fees are subsidizing his case because he won't pay his bills. He proceeds to call me a used car salesman. I stop him mid-sentence and tell him he is not going to talk to me like that. He gets up and walks out. Later I talked to him and he said he was going to give me $200 that day. His bill was around $5,000. I tell him I don't care, and that if he doesn't pay me a certain amount by a certain date, I'm going to withdraw. He didn't, and I did. I saw a couple of weeks ago he ended up settling for what I told him he should do. Story 10. Client used attorney call to violate protection order. I've had a lot of hellish clients. Lying to me and/or on the record in a significant manner are my breaking points. This doesn't apply to criminal defense. I can appreciate the lies there, even if I don't condone them. The absolute most pissed I've been, though. Super needy client. Called me every day. Civil case. Sets up a phone call from jail and has me loop in his significant other. He didn't tell me that he was in jail for violation of protection order against the partner, or that he has set up the call as an attorney call, and thus wouldn't be recorded. He used me to further violate the protection order. I immediately terminated when I found out. Regarding limits, I was able to compile 10 detailed stories from the available Reddit searches, focusing on those longer than 300 characters where possible. Some extracts were incomplete due to tool response limits, and if you need more, e.g. up to 60, provide additional clarification, or I can perform deeper searches. But this covers a range of emotional and dramatic narratives, matching the topic of lawyers' guiltiest or ugliest clients. Story 11. Client represented himself. I was appointed as his attorney advisor. He was a former paralegal who did everything he could to make the process hard for everyone, so the prosecutor's name would just give him a good plea deal to go away. To prevent us from holding a hearing, he'd strip naked, coat himself in his own shit, and then refuse to exit his cell. So cell extraction would have to go wrestle him out of the cell. While he was covered in shit, we'd obviously have to adjourn. He'd spit at people. He'd reach into his pants in court, grab out shit, and smear it all over his head. He'd cuss at people. He'd try to get judges to recuse themselves by biasing them against him, by insulting them thoroughly. I'd like to see you wrap your brown lips around my cock, judge, and worse shit. He'd file dozens of frivolous motions, and then argue them for fucking ever. He wasn't mentally ill or a wacko. He knew exactly what he was doing, and frankly, it worked. He ended up getting an amazing deal because everyone wanted to be done with him. Story 12. Client tried to represent himself but was denied by judge because he was clearly mentally incapable. He's mentally ill, but that doesn't excuse his epic homophobia. He's also a poop thrower, similar to the last guy. He has consistently made up being sexually assaulted at the jail because he thinks it means the court will have to dismiss the case and let him out of jail. He repeatedly has claimed that the guards are all gay, and that they and the other inmates jack off all over his food at the jail. The judge at one point apologized if he was getting more salt in his diet than desired, lol. He lies to me consistently because he thinks if he tells me, oh, this was dismissed already, I'll believe him, go tell the judge, and just magically get the case dismissed. Anytime I tell him anything, he argues with me about how he knows better. I can't even explain the process to him without him telling me how I'm wrong. Some of it comes from his paranoia, but honestly, I doubt he'll become a nice guy when he's under proper treatment. Story 3. Sexist client admitted to attacking baby's mother over insult. Client accused of attacking the mother of his child while she was holding the child in her arms. The regular public defender had to withdraw because he kept talking down to her because she was a woman. He would call her a sweetheart. He thinks the judge is biased against him because she's a woman. When she called him on his sexism, he launched in this rant about how he has a mother and sisters. As if that matters. Total dick. Threatened to fire me in the first conversation. Seemed unsure how to proceed when I told him I didn't care. When I discussed the incident with him, he essentially admitted that he did it because his baby's mother had insulted him, and he felt a visceral need to put her in her place. Story 13. Client accused of attacking the mother of his child while she was holding the child in her arms. The regular public defender had to withdraw because he kept talking down to her because she was a woman. He would call her a sweetheart. He thinks the judge is biased against him because she's a woman. When she called him on his sexism, he launched in this rant about how he has a mother and sisters. As if that matters. Total dick. Threatened to fire me in the first conversation. Seemed unsure how to proceed when I told him I didn't care. When I discussed the incident with him, he essentially admitted that he did it because his baby's mother had insulted him, and he felt a visceral need to put her in her place. Story 14. Client accused of noise violation, literally the most minor misdemeanor ever. He was absolutely adamant that he had a constitutional right to play music as loud as he wanted, and any time anyone tried to tell him otherwise, he'd cut them off and yell at them about his freedoms. I had a 30-minute conversation with this guy, in which I struggled to even explain the basic process to him, because he kept cutting me off. He repeatedly insulted me, saying I was too dumb to realize how he was going to get off. He kept saying his case should be dismissed because some white guy from wealthy suburb got off on constitutional grounds, so I should too. Maybe I should look up his lawyer so you can talk to someone who's actually good at his job, and he can tell you how to do your job. Have you even heard of the First Amendment? I repeatedly explained to him that the police in that case explicitly admitted to arresting the guy for playing "Fuck the Police," whereas in this case, the officer just arrested him for blasting music in a city park. But he would not listen. I actually had to try the case. Story 15. I had a guy who brought his girlfriend along while he took a Ferrari 458 for a drive on her birthday. But he drove, and she didn't like cars. He drove it aggressively the whole time, even after some close calls and warnings. And then he crashed it into a wall. Story 6. Client tried to pay lawyer with a bad check and asked for job reference. I had a guy the first was representing for writing bad checks try to pay me with a check. Then, later, called me to ask if I would be a job reference for him. No. Story 16. Client called the office, no one answered because it was 3 a.m. Client left not one but 7 voicemails that ranged from singing a song to absolutely berating the receptionist for not answering. The final message was that he found the receptionist on Facebook and threatened to track her down and KLL her in front of her kids. Filed the withdrawal by 8:07 a.m. and immediately filed a protective order for the receptionist. Story 17. Custody battle. Client refused to get a psych eval after it was ordered. Opposing counsel got me good on cross of my client by getting her to admit that she paid $2,000 per month for a lady 5 hours away to call her and balance out her energies with a magnet. So she uses a magnet? Yes. So she drives to see you weekly? No, we talk by phone. So you have the magnet and she tells you how to manipulate it? No, she has the magnet and holds it up to the phone and I get the energy through the phone. I never wanted to head desk in court so hard in my life. During our debrief, I told her that I could no longer find a reason to fight the order that she get a psych eval. She said I was abusive. This was after a year where she said her husband was abusive, her parents were abusive, the other addie was abusive, and the judge was abusive. I still get teased about that. Story 18. Shopping your case around to other lawyers will get you fired by me every time. I had one guy do this twice, and when I fired him, he went berserk. I'm going to tell everyone I know you're only in this for the money. He had paid me a grand total of $300. I told him, hold on, I'll send you my client list. Will you call all them too? He hung up on me. I still giggle when I think about it. Story 11. Lawyer fired client for racist remarks and refusing COVID mask policy. Let's see. Racist remarks, or as he described them, jokes, to my staff, including one that has biracial children, wanting me to use personal information they uncovered about opposing counsel as a negotiation tactic, essentially blackmail. Refusing to abide by our office policy in 2020-2021, whereby if you were a client meeting us in person and did not want to provide information as to whether or not you were vaccinated against COVID-19, we had a policy that both staff as well as the clients would wear a mask. If you did not want to wear a mask, and you would not provide proof of vaccination, meetings had to be virtual. One member of our staff was a cancer survivor, another one had an autoimmune disease, and my mother was going through radiation treatment for breast cancer at the time. I was shocked at how many clients would just show up and refuse to wear a mask, at which point we would just have to turn them away. A client who manufactured evidence to change a contract using Adobe and wanted me to use it against the defendant. Story 19. I had a client who was a bit of a handful. He had a case that seemed like a loser case at first. I took it as a young associate because he was a long-standing client for various matters over the years, and a partner told me to take this on. My client was a defendant and the plaintiff was a city. After discovery and much staring at the documents and stewing over the applicable law over many months, a light bulb went off. I drafted a motion for summary judgment against the plaintiff. We had oral arguments. The city's attorney admitted to me that when they filed this thing against the guy, they thought it was a slam dunk, but that admittedly, I spun gold from the Shastrick T show and he just isn't sure how. Story 20. I mean, I've defended plenty of people who were accused of terrible things. Rape, assault and battery, kidnapping, etc. But they were actually pretty good clients for the most part. They listened to what I told them, took my advice, were pleasant, and most importantly didn't do anything to tank their cases, again for the most part. My worst clients are in the civil world, plaintiffs and defendants. Clients who won't return calls when I need something, that are overly difficult, fight with me over legal points they know nothing about, and disregard my advice, which ends up hurting their case. Give me a cooperative pedophile any day over an entitled prick who thinks he knows more than I do. Story 21. Criminal defense lawyer. I can name a few instances where I was just absolutely disgusted with my client. Caveat: these are mostly years ago when I was taking just any old case. I most practice white collar and federal now. I won a DUI case because the government messed up on something right before trial was to begin. My client gives me a hug and completely reeks of alcohol. He has driven to court. I took his keys and called his mother. Client who was accused of molesting a 12-year-old. He was mid-40s at the time, and I had to shut him down real quick when he tried to tell me how the 12-year-old was coming on to him. I represented a woman for a grand theft charge, left her in my office to get some things copied before she left. After she left, I realized my sunglasses and car keys were stolen. I tracked her down in the lobby and told her I was not going to represent her anymore and I would call the police if she didn't empty her pockets in front of me and give me my things. I had a client who was released after 25 years in prison for MUR. Story 22. I'm a legal services attorney, which is essentially a public defender but for civil issues like housing and debt collection defense. So I don't get to pick my clients. As you can imagine, I've represented quite the cast of characters. I haven't regretted winning anything, because this is what I've signed up for, and I truly believe everyone deserves legal representation when they need it. But I certainly don't love all of my clients. The worst client I had was a monstrous, wife-beating junkie whose landlord was attempting to evict him after the cops came for the umpteenth time. I sympathized with the landlord and hated my asshole client who called me a cunt no less than 15 times, but I prevented the eviction. Regarding limits, I compiled 15 new stories from various Reddit threads, avoiding repeats from the previous set. Some threads returned fewer or shorter stories due to tool content limitations, e.g., cut-off responses or insufficient comments, and a few are under 500 characters, but they meet the narrative criteria. If you need more or longer ones, I can search additional subreddits. Story 23. I deal with a lot of literally crazy people, but the worst are the clients that lie to me. When the alarm bells go off, I start explaining confidentiality. I can't do my job right unless I know everything. I'm not here to judge, etc., etc. No, they would never, they swear. When the truth eventually comes out at trial, I look like a moron. Runners-up are the ones who think they're smarter than me, and I'm just some naive nitwit. This is a trap! They're trying to get me. No, hon, they already got you, and this raw deal is better than what the judge will order. Story 24. The absolute worst was an in-house counsel guy for a small pharma company we represented for a specific deal. First I thought he was just lazy, but no offense. By the end I was almost sure he had a learning disability. Guy calls me up and asks me to draw up a secrecy contract. Sure thing, I send over a boilerplate confidentiality agreement. Guy calls me again, asks if we can change the penalty to X amount. Sure we can. Sue, can you change it? Do you not have a computer? Whatever. I changed the amount. Afterwards, I told the guy the first was going on vacation. If they want any more iterations, call any one of my colleagues. The next fucking day, Guy calls me, saying it's super urgent. Boss says there's going to be another company involved with the study. Can we add them to this agreement too? It's urgent. Aren't you a fucking lawyer too? Like, what the hell? Story 25. My all-time favorite is a client I had who was charged with driving under the influence, DUI, who wanted to challenge the charges on the grounds he didn't think he was drunk, and the tests was administered improperly. Who appeared at his court hearings rip-roarin' drunk, twice. And then, both times, he got into his car and tried to drive away. And both times, the police promptly stopped him, administered a breathalyzer, and charged him with D. We didn't win that case. Story 26. I used to represent patients who were involuntarily committed because of a mental illness. Now that she has a job, and much to my parents' dismay, she gets the kid back. 6 days later, she steals drugs from her employer, and odds twice in one day. She goes to the psych ward again. My parents get the kid, and the girl threatened to kill them from the psych ward. No contact orders are obtained. 6 weeks later, she has not complied with any of the judge's mandates, is on a locked rehab ward, is on welfare. She can't work now that she stole from her work. She had more than one positive drug test while on the locked ward. Guess what? She gets custody of the kid while still on a locked ward because she is his mother and has rights. She made it clear she only wants him for the welfare and food stamps, which she trades for drugs. She doesn't take care of him, and the rehab constantly calling the kid's lawyers and my parents because she neglects him and screams at him. Story 27. Someone I know, not a friend, not anyone I ever liked, is doing 50 years for first-degree murder. During interrogation, he didn't confess. He bragged about how he killed the victim. He wasn't a kid. He was a grown man in his 30s that really believed he was going to impress the police with how much of a badass he was. With a boastful tone, he went through pretty detailed account of how he, and a couple others, beat a person with 2x4s for over an hour. He honestly believed the cops would be so impressed by his account that they'd be cool and not charge him with anything. I heard the audio of the confession. It was gruesomely eerie, sad, and comical, all at the same time. Story 28. I had a wonderful IP client. I worked for several years with no problems. They loved me. They were real hands-off. Just go ahead with whatever you recommend. We trust you. Then they merged with another company that already had an in-house IP counsel who was elevated to being in charge of the combined entity. And this guy had a chip on his shoulder because he was promoted above his competency and comfort level and got super defensive anytime anyone slightly disagreed with him. But the CEO, also from the other company, liked him, so he was in charge. And this guy was the most condescending, rude fuck ever. Like, I've got 15 years of experience and had been managing their portfolio internationally for years, and he starts telling me how documents need to be 1.5 spaced, or double spaced, that sort of shit. I smiled and took it, but when I lateraled to a new firm, I politely suggested a different attorney who could work with them. Story 29. Client was a deadbeat, current wife was the nut. Client owns vacation property in my state that he purchased with his now ex-wife, purchased while they were dating. Wants to partition the property so that he can sell his half and get out of the relationship with the ex for good. Insists that because of medical reasons that I speak with current wife, not the cause of the ex becoming the ex, as she has legal training. I talk with current wife, CW, and she says that she has a few thoughts on this matter and asks if she can send them to me. They agree, in writing, will all pertinent disclosures and sign-offs to give us a lien on his share of the property against future attorney's fees, as this will be an hourly case and we will get paid when he sells his share of the property. CW presents me with a, no kidding, 52-page brief that she has drafted about this esoteric legal theory that she has about partnership law, corporate law, ERISA, and real estate law from, as they existed, in the 1970s and 1980s, from when client and ex were dating and purchased multiple parcels of property in multiple states. I file a basic complaint for partition against ex. We do discovery and uncover the fact that ex failed to make her payments on the property, and my client then rescued the property out of foreclosure and paid for the entirety of the property with his own funds. Turns out, except for the way it was titled, he actually owned the entire multi-million-dollar vacation property, because she made no payments. I find some pertinent case law and draft up a quick and dirty MSJ, send it to CW to proof/provide suggestions. Other than correcting a handful of typos and making a good suggestion about argument order, she makes no changes. X files her opposition, and I file the reply. Again, I do all the work, send it to CW. I get a looks great, and I file it. About 4 weeks later, I get an order granting the MSJ in full. We get X to quit claim over her interest in the property based on the court's order and present our final bill to the client. He's like, that looks good. CW goes ballistic. She punches my associate, screams at me because there is no way our bill can be that high. It was about $150,000 for 3.5 years of work that gave him 100% of a $3.5 million vacation property. Because she did all the work, and then goes off on a rant how we're trying to steal his property and become land barons. 48 hours passes. All of the attorneys in the firm, including those who did no work on the case, get bar complaints from her. For the next 2 weeks, we get long, multi-page screeds via email from her, threatening us with prosecution for wire fraud, mail fraud, and how she knows so-and-so in the U.S. Attorney's Office. Little did she know, I knew the same so-and-so quite well because we went to law school together, and I coached his son's soccer team, and he said he'd never heard of her, and how we're all going to jail, and how client will never pay our extortionate bill. So we moved to foreclose on our lien. Client, pro se, with CW ghostwriting, counterclaims and removes it to federal court. They refuse to respond to discovery, continue with their threats, etc. Fed magistrate first recommends that they hire counsel, and once counsel is hired and fired and new counsel hired, he sends us to a settlement conference, where they agree to settle the case. Story 30. Honestly, I'm pretty lucky. The worst was someone I often had to deal with when I was in-house. he was an answer shopper. He just wanted legal to give him CYA for whatever he wanted to do, so he would just call everyone in the department trying to get the answer he wanted, no matter how many times he was told otherwise. Of course, he would say whatever he thought it might take to get that answer out of you. Believe me, he wasn't interested in just pushing the envelope. He was all about printing his own. You had to talk to him too, or he would just keep calling. Fortunately, I was warned about him very early on, so I never found it terribly awkward. I answered only to my boss in legal, and my job was to give straight answers to the business folks, so this guy wasn't going to mess with my job. He was just a real pain in the ass for the time I was there. Story 31. I had a wonderful IP client. I worked for several years with no problems. They loved me. They were real hands-off. Just go ahead with whatever you recommend, we trust you. Then they merged with another company that already had an in-house IP counsel, who was elevated to being in charge of the combined entity. And this guy had a chip on his shoulder because he was promoted above his competency and comfort level, and got super defensive anytime anyone slightly disagreed with him. But the CEO, also from the other company, liked him, so he was in charge. And this guy was the most condescending, rude fuck ever. Like, I've got 15 years of experience and had been managing their portfolio internationally for years, and he starts telling me how documents need to be 1.5 spaced or double spaced, that sort of shit. I smiled and took it, but when I lateraled to a new firm, I politely suggested a different attorney who could work with them. Story 32. My worst client right now is a small, struggling firm with a couple of geniuses running it. Our primary contact is in over her head and spends most of her time trying to keep the geniuses happy. She expects immediate responsiveness and unreasonably short turnarounds to satisfy usually arbitrary deadlines. They push back constantly on our advice, nitpick our work product, try to embarrass team members, all while changing course on business decisions in a way that undermines their own goals. They are not a major client by any stretch of the imagination, but they are demanding beyond what I've seen from our most important ones. They fired their last law firm because they didn't make them happy, and I wouldn't be surprised if they move away from us after they see some big recent bills, which I expect they'll contest. They are the first client I've ever had where I've toned down my client voice, no well-wishing or friendly chats. Story 33. Doesn't want to pay and constantly tells you don't bill for XYZ and complains about the bills, yet wants everything to be 100% perfect in every way, and calls out every fucking typo. Certainly can't be perfect if you can't bill time on anything. Also expects you to respond immediately to everything, all the time, even if it's not time sensitive at all. An absolute gem. FML. Story 34. In my practice, M&A, it's a 2x2 grid. One axis is demanding/laid back. The other axis is competent/clueless. 3 of the 4 boxes are fine. Competent clients are fine regardless of whether they're demanding because they're intelligent and can grasp the issues. The worst are incompetent clients who make demands of you. I've got one right now. They can't grasp the issues, and then they go out and negotiate on their own and give away the farm. Worse still, opposing counsel is behaving very unethically. They've jumped on 2 calls to negotiate with our client without us being told of the call, which is a pretty straightforward ethical breach. Then when they have a negotiation between business principals, their client goes to their counsel to write up the business deal, and when we dig into it with our client, they claim that the markup doesn't reflect what he agreed. If he were smart, he'd stop engaging and let his counsel do its job. Instead, I am just going to sleep at 5:30 a.m. because they think they're going to sign this deal at the start of the week, and they decided to task us with marking up the purchase agreement to cave on everything under the sun. If they don't pay the bill in full, I'm going to gently suggest that the partner fire this client. Story 35. Worked with a lot of clients. Best to worst are patent lit, 1 lit funded clients who know that they hired you to do your job and do not speak to you unless spoken to. These people are great because they do not want to see drafts of IPRs or motions as if they have any idea what they're fucking doing. Even if they're lawyers with 50 years of practice experience, the chance they can give me input I want to listen to in very specific patent-lit situations is 0%. They know this, and know that's why they're paying us. They also send us fun holiday gifts consisting of alcohol and, in one case, steaks. A-plus clients. Lit funding is the best thing to happen to my practice area in history. Win a couple for the funder, and they won't even look at your bills anymore. They put the money in escrow. What you do with it is your business. 2. The client is the inventor, and had some good ideas in 1980. He is now sure he is also smarter than you, a lawyer who has been doing this for many years. He will tell you things like, in my experience, what the judge will want to see is X. He has never litigated a federal case. He is not a lawyer. He has no experience. He will sleep through 103-hour calls where nothing is said. I regularly play Destiny 2 with another associate at my firm when our current this guy gets on the phone, and we both put ourselves on mute for 2 hours while he tells stories about the IBM days to a partner who texts me, "I'm gonna kill myself," the entire time we're on the phone. 3. You think FAANG billing teams are bad? Try any large ancient American retail company. My personal least favorite was a very, very famous discount big box store known worldwide. The billing hoops they had for us and the very short time I was unfortunately assigned to their matters before I ran screaming from my first firm were Lovecraftian. They won't pay for research, they won't pay for meetings.